About 71% of the Earth's surface is water covered, and the oceans hold about 96.5% of all Earth's water. The human body is made up of between 50 and 75% of water. This is Living in Liquid, and I'm Jamie Mitchell.
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Living in Liquid, and I'm super stoked to have winning America's Cup captain Jimmy Spithill with us here. Jimmy, thanks, mate. I appreciate the time. And first off, how's your recovery? You were saying that you went down and got some stem cells, which I've been super interested in for a long time. So I'm interested to hear how that all went.
Yeah. Oh, hey, mate, and thanks again for having me onto the podcast. It's a real honour. Yeah, I've been looking at it for a while. I had a mate go to Panama. He suffered a really bad spinal injury, and then I know they set up in Dubai, and then I heard a few other friends go down to Tijuana at CPI.
Yeah,
and so yeah, look, I mean, I've been spoilt with medical treatment. A good, really close friend of mine by the name of Dr. Robert Bray runs a facility called DISC in California. Do a lot of athletes, military, really a world leader. And I've had a lot of injuries myself, a lot of elbow injuries just from high load gripping, lower back, just also things just I've done that was stupid when I was younger. But I'd heard some great things about stem cells, but you can't get it to that sort of level in the US or down under. The FDA haven't yet allowed it. And I think it's really driven a lot by big pharma and insurance.
yeah.
But it's certainly, I believe, something of the future. And speaking to friends that have gone and done it, unbelievable. I mean, for a host of different issues and injuries. So, yeah, for me, it was really lower back, discs, and elbows, just multiple torn tendons. And yeah, I just wanted to give it a go. So I'm basically 3 weeks post injections in the discs and the elbows, and then a bunch via IV. And you follow a protocol. You know, IV, Myers cocktails, NAD plus, ozone, you do a bunch of hyperbaric, you get MRI'd obviously before you go in. And then the hardest thing, I think, for all of us athletes that get injured is the recovery. And
Not doing anything.
Not rushing. So that's the struggle for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I know Shane Dorian went down to CPI and he was just doing a follow-up actually the last couple of weeks, and I had spoken to him, and yeah, he's had massive improvements in his I think it was his back and his neck was specifically, and to the point where he could only go and surf for like an hour or two and he'd have to stop. But now his ability to go and surf longer sessions and everything has changed dramatically. And I think, yeah, the big thing I think he was mentioning was that the inability to, like the stem cells go and find where they need to be, go to inflammation spots, right? So if you go and start working out all the time, the stem cells are going to start to follow to those places instead of the direct places where you've got injected. So he seemed to think that he was 6 to 9 months where he really started to feel the full help of the stem cells when they went in.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like most things, it's different for everyone, how you react and how you recover. You know, I've had some friends that had relief almost like within a week that have been in kind of chronic pain and just eliminated. I had another guy I spoke to had that skin condition, eczema, quite badly, his whole life really, and that's now kind of gone after I think about 4 months, and he's off all the meds. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, again, for me, it was just try something other than surgery. And, I think the future is, in the perfect world, you would bank your own sort of core umbilical stem cells. You'd have your parents would bank them, they'd freeze them. And then that's the perfect scenario because then they're at their sort of highest potency of, rejuvenation. And then, obviously the body's not going to reject them. But, they are donor stem cells, but they run through a whole lot of blood checks, they have a single source, etc. But yeah, it's kind of cool just seeing where it can go and just trying to get a little bit more longevity and less downtime if something does pop up, or just sort of, as Shane's doing, I guess, sort of top up a bit here and there to stay there, because you're dead right. I mean, it's almost like a fire in your body. So if you got inflammation, the IV stem cells will basically go to where the fire is. So that's why if you went for a jog, as you said, they just go to your lungs and probably your legs. The ones they inject, like in discs and joints, are pretty much captive, but you've
Yep.
got to be a little careful about damaging them. But yeah, the worst thing you can do is just rush into it and then, have them sort of go to an area that you don't have a problem with.
Yeah. We're going to create superhuman athletes, Jimmy. Never be injured, go all day, never get tired. And your winch man will like, oh man, that's crazy. Well, it is. I mean,
Those are good days.
modern technology is amazing. And, I actually got on some of the peptides from a company called Fit Aminos for the healing of the scar and all that sort of stuff. And it's been amazing. Everyone that's seen my face from the cuts is amazed at how fast it has healed. And I have no doubt that a lot of that's due to some of the peptides that I've been taking over the last 3 to 4 weeks,
Yeah, I've heard similar things, and I think it's just a cool time for athletes, whether you're at the beginning of your career or the end of your career, because I mean, look, let's face it. In the past, or certainly when I started out, didn't really think a whole lot about diet. It was all about just put the hammer down and go as hard as you can, and at a certain, you can do that for a while, and then at a certain point, it's going to catch you. And not only that, just from a competitive standpoint, you want to tick every single box now because everyone else is. They're just better educated because of all the information you have online. You can now watch, whether it's certain maneuvers or techniques or technical side. There's a lot of data. Where again, in the past, it was maybe watching a rerun of some video or a broadcast. So yeah, I think today with everything in terms of medical and just what's available to athletes, young and old, it's just a cool time to see the development and evolution of where it's all going.
Yeah, especially for you guys, like, being supported by some of the huge companies that, you guys are supported by, especially Red Bull and stuff. The opportunities that those companies give to their athletes is like, it's incredible. It's one of my, like, I guess, not regrets, but I just never had an opportunity. But like, I would have loved to have had that opportunity to work with a brand like that, those guys, to really dive into, like you said, all the details and it would have been amazing. So you guys have had that, right? Like, not only from the, like you said, the medical and stuff, but just all the gadgets and stuff that you must have got from like the training for the America's Cup must have been insane. The details and the fine details.
Yeah, I mean, look, the bigger campaigns, you definitely have a lot of resource at your disposal. And then, as you mentioned, with a lot of these different partners that we've had, whether it be Red Bull, whether it be Oracle, Airbus, hydraulic companies, electronic software, it's quite incredible just what you get to kind of go and really delve into. And sometimes in these bigger campaigns where you're well over, sometimes 1 to 200 people in these teams, it's really about being careful that you don't complicate it on your own. And it's in a lot of ways, sometimes having too much resource can steer you down the wrong direction in that you kind of end up doing everything and nothing that well. And if you don't get the big stuff right and the big picture right, especially early on, actually, the little stuff won't save you at the end. So that's always been quite fundamental. But again, the ability to see some of these tools and the resource, it's unbelievable where it is now. I mean, even 10 years ago it was impressive, but I think now with the machine learning, the AI models and tools that from a race data analysis, even looking at, say, you do like in Sail GP now, the race is around 12, 15 minutes long, 13 boats, they're doing up to 100 Ks an hour, very tight racetrack. And then the team has basically 5 minutes before the next race, and they'll do 4 races a day over a weekend. The teams now are starting to really work on these tools because you got 5 minutes to get the message to the squad. Hey, this is what we may need to change. And not only that, we can see all of the data of all the other teams. We can see it live. We can see it from the past event. And so it's a problem of too much data and really trying to identify, well, what's really going to make the difference here to getting the result for the team.
Mm.
And every race is different, as you know. I mean, the conditions change, and it's very dynamic anyway, because it's not you you're dealing with. I mean, you got to get around the course, but it's a little like riding a motorbike on the road. You got to deal with the other drivers, and you don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite fascinating.
Does it come down? Is it coming down now, Jimmy, to a point where, like, you've got 5 teams, say, everyone's very capable. They're all pretty much at the same level. And it's the people behind the scenes that are giving you that data. Like, if you've got good data guys and these, like, just super switched on people that are giving you what you need to give you the edge, is it nearly more the performance is coming from that side than the athletes? Is that weird to say, or is that?
No, it isn't yet. And I think one of the hardest things, especially in a racing environment, and you see it in Formula One, it's really difficult to input into the driver or the athletes when they're focused. It can be really unsettling. And if you look at Formula One, they actually don't communicate that much. But when they do, a lot of the time, you can tell the drivers are a little bit on edge. So they really try and hit it. And that's just one person. But when you've got a team on a boat and they're powering it and they're making it go around the track, and then they're dealing with 12 other teams doing those speeds on a tight racetrack, and things are just happening very, very fast. I mean, you got closing speeds sometimes 200 kilometers an hour. So it just happens so fast. So you can actually cause more problems than solutions. But it's definitely a big part, because we have live comms. We can speak to them, and that's kind of the art now. This is a new thing for us. Is when do you interject? When do you give the information? Because you don't want to unsettle them. And at the same time, the vision from off the boat and what they're seeing, we don't have a perfect view of the water. It's sort of like you're trying to tell someone how to surf a wave, but you can't really see all the little imperfections, or if the surface is a little bumpy or choppy, etc. So yeah, it's a really interesting time. You definitely play an impact, but the difference with Sail GP is that the hardware is the same, in that everyone has got on the same equipment and boat. The boats are constantly upgraded with new foils and software and hydraulics, etc., etc. But the difference is everyone gets the upgrade at the same time. Whereas, let's say for like the America's Cup and a lot of the other side of the sport, it's an arms race. It's about developing, this as much as you can and just pushing stuff right to the limit without it breaking. And that's the name of the game, similar to Formula One. So, but in that case, you're right in that the fastest boat will win. It's just as simple as that. I mean, everyone's good enough generally to get them around the track. The fastest boat will win, just like in F1, the fastest car will win.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Before we get too far into I love this stuff, but I want to take it all the way back to the beginning, mate. And like, where'd you grow up? I think it was in NZ, right?
No, actually in Sydney. I've spent a lot of time in NZ. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in New Zealand, a big part of my career. But my parents were in the western suburbs of Sydney, and they just wanted a change. And so there was a place called Pittwater north of Sydney in the national park and around Elvina Bay, Scotland Island area. And they just saw this old shack advertised in the bush. And they just said, look, let's do it. So they bought it, and I was young, but my recollections are really just growing up there. And the only way to get there was by boat. We couldn't get television. You're in the bush, and very, very small community. And that's just a way of life. So naturally, as kids, we would either take a little tinny, like a aluminum or aluminium, however you want to say it, with a little outboard, or we would every now and then there'd be a little ferry. And that was it. So you'd come home from school, and what would you do? I mean, you had 2 shots. You'd either go up in the bush, everything in Australia can kill you in the bush. So you'd say, righto, generally, let's go and hit the water. And for me, it started pretty early on, like in a rowing boat, and then a windsurfer, and then it just sort of grew from there. I mean, naturally, once you hit as soon as you can, you want to get a boat with the biggest outboard you can find.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as soon as you said Pittwater there, like Sydney is such, just going across that harbour, all the bays and it's made for sailing, right? Like it's a huge sailing influence in and around the Sydney Harbour, and I mean, obviously, like you said, you're growing up around the harbour. But when did that next step? Like, was it joining a sailing club, or when did you start competing, or when did that all start happening?
Yeah, I mean, look, I started windsurfing. Like as
Mm,
a kid, I remember having posters of Robbie and
yeah,
then Jason Polikow, on my wall, and there was like I think a bit of a real, let's say, not phase, but windsurfing was really big for a while. And I even
yeah,
remember my old man used to race the old Wally windsurfer. And then, so yeah, that captured me. And so I got a windsurfer at like 5, and that's what I do. Me and a couple of
mm,
mates, we do that. Then we would have these council cleanups. It would happen like twice a year, and a barge would come around the bay and the island and just collect junk. And one of our neighbours was throwing out this old little wooden boat, sailing boat. And so my dad and my sister and I, we just grabbed it and took it home, and then we repaired it, painted it. And then now when my sister Katie and I came home from school, we'd sometimes just go out sailing on that. And then one day the old man said, "Hey, listen, they race these things over on the mainland. Why don't we go give it a go?" So, okay, we sailed over. It was pretty windy. The old man's just in the tinny kind of following us. And we get over there and we pull it up on the boat up on the beach at the sailing club. And pretty much instantly, a bunch of kids came up and started kind of ridiculing it and making fun of
yeah,
it. So much so, my sister actually started crying. And because all the boats there were fiberglass, beautiful sails, ours were rusty. And I mean, we painted the boat. And the old man saw it and he just said, "Look, don't worry about what anyone else says. You guys built this boat, you repaired it, and you've been sailing it a lot. Just
mm,
get out there, do the course, and just see what happens." And so anyway, he just sort of drew the course out in the sand with a stick. And we said, "Right, okay, off we go." It was windy. And anyway, we did the course across the line and the gun went off. So anyway, we just sailed in, pulled the boat up on the beach, and we'd won the race. But this time, when the same group of kids came around, no one was laughing. And
yeah,
so it was just a really sort of important, I guess, lesson to learn as a kid that it can be easy to think, and even now, that you look at
mm,
someone else and what they've got, and, oh, maybe that's better, the grass is greener, where, mate, play the cards you got and just play them as well as you can. And in most of my career, anyway, I've seen that, generally hard work and will beat talent every day of the week, unless talent's willing to work just as hard.
yeah, yeah. No, that's a great story. It's you've probably come around from like the western suburbs around the corner straight into this. Everyone's got a ton of money. Their boats are brand new, and it's always nice to have that little chip on your shoulder, I guess, too, right? That like, hey, I'm gonna beat these kids with the beat up boat, like, and give it to them, and yeah, I think that we lose that in this day and age with social media and Instagram, and we look at what everyone looks like they have, and they don't even have it. They're just sort of like fake showing it off, right? And
Yeah.
just we got to realize that hard work, determination, commitment, consistency, all these things are really all that matters when it comes to being successful in not just sport, but in everyday life.
Yeah. No, it's dead right. I'll never forget, like, one of my boxing coaches said to me once, he goes, "It's just really hard to beat someone that just refuses to give up."
Yeah.
But I think the other thing we had going for us was that it was a way of life. So no matter what we were doing, we were spending time on the water. If we were in the tinny, if we were just swimming, I mean, we're just always looking at it. And to get groceries, we've got to go to the mainland. So, and it's not like the weather's just beautiful every time. There'll be a storm, be raining, bad luck. That's what you're doing. I mean, I remember one time where the old man was working that weekend. And so anyway, Katie and I were like, "Oh, we're going to go to the race." And we were young and it was really windy. Anyway, we sail over to the mainland. It was a decent sail. We pull the boat up on the beach. There's basically no one there. And so anyway, we walk in the club because you have to sign on this sheet. We go and we go, "Oh, what's happening?" They go, "Oh, racing's cancelled. It's just way too dangerous." And we're like, "Oh, righto." So just walk back down, get in the boat and just sail off home. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of like, mates of mine that grew up in Alaska or, out in farms and that, where you just, nowadays, if that was me, there's no way I'd let my kids do that.
Was it trial and error, Jimmy? Like for you as a kids, like obviously your dad had the skills and was showing you around, but like you and Katie were like really just like going out there and making mistakes and like learning on the fly type of a deal.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And even then, like the old man didn't come really from a sailing background. Like he was a
Mm,
water skier and an electrical engineer. So he got into it later in life, and then the lifestyle naturally, and the windsurfing. But yeah, it really was. And I think one of the things we really learned was as soon as we started doing the racing at these little clubs, some of them had coaches. And so once you joined, you you know, the membership fees were really cheap for kids, but we suddenly had access to coaches. And not
mm,
only that, but coaches that weren't our dad. So it was just different hearing
yeah.
that feedback and advice. So that was really cool.
And then, like, tell me that progression from then to like through high school and stuff. Like, are you really diving into the windsurfing, or is it into the sailing clubs and the racing? Like, how does that next progression look from then on?
Well, in the same bay where I live, there were two guys off Australia too, which was the boat that won the America's Cup back in '83. I mean, I was really young, but I mean, in that moment in Australia, really was a defining kind of country stopping. Australia back then was in a recession, and it was one of those things that just kind of lifted the whole country and just showed how powerful sport can be, and that we could, little Australia could take on the mighty USA and actually beat them, broke the longest winning streak in sports history at that point in the New York Yacht Club. So anyway, these guys were kind of like heroes to me because I grew up listening to the stories. One of them had like a bit of a boat shed where they would repair boats, and sometimes I'd go and work over there on the weekends. So I was just dreaming that, maybe one day. I remember telling the old man when I was young, I'm going to race the America's Cup, and he just sort of went, yeah, no worries. Kids say all sorts of stuff. So just sort of said, yeah, good on you, mate. And then, yeah, so that was, I think, always in the back of my mind. And then as I got older and we started racing, there were two pathways. It was probably the America's Cup, and then the other one was the Olympics. But the
Olympics,
Olympics,
yeah.
you needed money, and for me, none of the boats were really that appealing, and we just didn't have the money either. So that decision was pretty quick and easy. But one of the sailing clubs in Pittwater had this youth program, and they provided all the boats, and they would train and race every weekend for either 6 to 9 months. And so I signed up for that. I thought this is awesome. And then if you won that kind of selection series and program, then they would fly you to go do the sort of youth world championship against other teams that sent other clubs that sent teams, which was in New Zealand. So that was really my pathway, was this program, because you didn't have to own a boat. They're all provided. It was great coaching, and it was just, again, just hours on the water both days, rain, hail, or shine. And I love that because that was kind of my way of life. And that was a stepping stone really to other racing, competing internationally, and then getting a shot, really as I was getting to the end of high school.
Yeah, so like 16, 17, and then are you sailing? Is it single? Like, are you sailing these competitions by yourself, or you got with a partner, or
Always with the team. But
yeah,
I did try once on my own, and quite honestly, just obviously the windsurfing and other stuff I was doing on my own for fun, but the competing, I just loved being in a team environment.
yeah,
And at the same time at high school, like sport was really an outlet for me. So I was doing any sport I could. I was playing rugby, Aussie rules, cricket, I mean, anything. And I just was seeing how, again, you were just not judged on what you look like or where you came from. It was all that went away as soon as you walked onto the field. So yeah, that was the big attraction to me, was sport in general at that stage in high school.
would you say you had like a natural ability? Were you one of those kids that, like it's like, oh, here comes Jimmy Spithill, like, like, or was it sort of just a bit of both, like some natural talent, a lot of hard work, like a dedication, like you had that mindset from a young age as a kid that like, I'm gonna do something here.
Just very average, mate. Like
Yeah.
good at nothing, to be honest, but willing to just keep going and just
Yeah.
putting it in, and not afraid to get up earlier or get up first and stay longer.
Yeah.
And whether I was playing rugby, I just figured pretty quickly that okay, if you can tackle, you'll probably be in the team. So
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do as many
Best
tackles as I
tackler.
can and be as good as I can, because I'm not going to be as good as a halfback. I don't have the skills of the fullback, not as big as a bunch of the forwards and locks. And again, people judge you by, okay, what are you doing and what are you putting in? And that was really, I think, the secret for me was just putting the hours in and just having a work ethic. And I saw that around me in the area I grew up was really blue collar. My old man was a really hard worker. I mean, he built our house. And when you build a house where we live, it's not like the delivery truck just drops the supplies off in the driveway. You got to go and get them, have them delivered to the wharf, load up a barge or your boat, take them over, carry them up the hill, like brick by brick. And I was the labourer, being the son. So you sort of see that, and it's just that's what you do. It's a way of life, and if you want to get somewhere, you got to get out there and sort of make it happen.
Yeah. You obviously, I mean, you had something for the ocean, right? The way that you looked at the ocean, you know what I mean? Like you must have seen growing up that like, hey, like I'm pretty good at this, the way that I see things, especially with sailing, right? And I'm far from a sailor, you know, like I've never really sailed at all, but just from the little times I've watched it, you know, like you definitely have to be like nearly seems to me like looking into the future, you know, of what's coming, what the wind's doing, how it's shifting and stuff. So like learning that and understanding that, like, you know, obviously you're always getting better and like trying to work it out, but you know, some people definitely have like a natural gift for that. So what was that like for you? Like learning, understanding it, and did you like go, you know what, I do see things a little differently than other people.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually probably not that dissimilar to really, when you look at what you're doing on the water and the different aspects in that, it's the same. You're really looking and anticipating. You're thinking about your next move, the next wave, where you're going to turn, everything. And it's really trying to be sort of a step or two, multiple moves ahead, as opposed to just reacting when it happens. And sometimes you do have to react when it happens. And I think just the time on the water was what set me up well, because again, I was, even if I wasn't sailing, even if I was sitting on the ferry or in the tinny, I had to navigate the waves. The
Mm,
wind, was it raining? You'd look out and have to figure out what are the odds I'm going to need a jacket today,
yeah.
and just simple things like that. So it just built in this anticipation of always looking, and at the same time, a gut instinct sometimes where you just felt like this was the right thing to do. And the more time we would find this when you would change boats or do something different, when you jump into a completely new boat, you really kind of like heads down, or what we call, you have the blinkers on like a horse, in that you're really just trying to learn to sail the boat. But over time, you start to feel it, and now you can get your head out and look around, and that's when you really go to another level. And that's especially important actually in offshore sailing, because obviously you brace at night. And so at night, and depending on conditions, you just can't see. So you've really got to rely on a combination of feel and instinct, but also instrumentation. But sometimes the instruments could fail, and
Yeah.
now you got to do it. So yeah, I think it's just a combination of all of the above.
Yeah. So you're a teenager, you know, you're getting all these opportunities like New Zealand and everything, and then what's next? How is it? You said the America's Cup is the big dream. Now, what's the process like from being a teenager, you know, from Australia going to New Zealand, getting these opportunities? Like, how do you now start to be like, okay, these are the steps I've got to get to potentially, you know, sailing the America's Cup? Because that must sound crazy, right? Like it's like with me, like Stacey, my producer, when we were all kids, I said I'm going to be surfing the Eddie, and
Yeah.
kids looked at me and just went, "Yeah, right, kid from Coffs Harbour, like you're dreaming," you know what I mean? And then like you sit there and go, "Wow, I'm in the Eddie. Like how did that happen?" You know, but there are steps, and as an athlete, you believe in yourself, and you know what these steps are potentially. So, I'd love to know, like, what was your mindset, and from you know those teenage years, how are you going to get there to the big show?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. And I think the biggest thing was just the sort of belief and drive that you're going to do it. And at that stage, I was definitely had way more people saying I wouldn't make it and that I couldn't do it. And probably, in all fairness, I actually don't blame them because it wasn't like there was many spots like the Eddie. You know, it's a very sort of select thing. So if someone, especially probably someone not from Hawaii, in your case, for a kid to say that, you're thinking, oh man, the odds are freaking
Low.
not good, pretty low. But again, for me, the hardest part was the America's Cup didn't really have a defined pathway to get in there. That okay, there was some guys from the Olympics. There was a bit of a circuit, a somewhat match racing circuit, and I was doing the youth one, and we were doing pretty well. And at that stage, the big opportunity came. I was at this award ceremony, and I was up for the Youth Sailor of the Year award in Australia. And there was a guy by the name of Sid Fisher who was up for the Ocean Racing Sailor of the Year. And so Sid Fisher was a really hard, the toughest guy I've ever worked with. You know, I mean, he came from the construction background, boxing, first grade rugby league, surfboat rowing. Very, very hard man. Anyway, we both won. And so afterwards, I just went up to him and said, hey, I've never done any offshore sailing. I would love the opportunity if it ever came up, you know. And he said, well, what are you doing this Saturday? And I said, nothing, even though I was. And he said, okay, turn up at 8 o'clock. So I got there at 6 and knocked on the door, and he kind of liked that. So I just started helping get the boat ready, stuff like that, the water bottles, whatever. And we went out there and we're getting ready for this offshore race. This is a 50-foot boat, and his boats were called Ragamuffin.
Oh, his boat was Ragamuffin? Or that's
all the Ragamuffins were his. So
wow.
They were like a sort of legendary string of offshore Australian boats, let's say.
I remember them in the Sydney to Hobart, the Ragamuffin. That was like,
Yeah, so he was one of these sort of, him and his crew were kind of the legends, you know. And so we went out and we're about to race off Sydney Heads, and then literally like 10 minutes before the start, I'm thinking I'm just going to be sitting on the side of the boat. 10 minutes before he goes, oi, come back, you're going to drive. And I was just like, shit, like I'd actually never used a steering wheel on a boat. It had always been a little tiller. And so, and this Ragamuffin had this huge one. And so I was like, okay, off we go. So off we went. And then, just fortunately we won the race. And then we got back to the dock and he said, all right, same time next weekend. And so at that stage, you know, Sid had done a couple of America's Cup campaigns. He was actually looking to do the next one. It was in New Zealand. This was the next one was in 2000 in Auckland. And so they couldn't pull a big one together. And so eventually at a certain point, he'd paid the entry fee, and the only way to get the entry fee back was almost $500,000, I think, was to turn up and do the first race. He had an old boat from 95, which was a dog. It had come last, basically, but it's sitting there down in the Sydney fish markets. And he basically came up, and I'm driving Ragamuffin each weekend. You know, we're doing like Sydney to Hobart, we're doing all sorts of stuff. I'm the youngest, you know, on the boat, and also just working down there on the boat, so straight out of high school. And he goes, look, how about you get a young team together? We'll go over there, we'll do the first race, and then I'll get my money back and we'll come back. And I'm like, great, no problem. Yeah, and we didn't have much time. You know, we only had a short amount of months to get organised. But so I just went out, found a whole bunch of young guys. We got Sydney 95, which is his old boat, repaired. We found a shipping sponsor, a couple of others. I mean, mate, I had no idea really what I was doing. I was just learning on the go of, well, how do I pull this all together?
Yeah.
And I had a little bit of experience from just running these smaller teams of four or five of my crew and competing internationally. But this was something clearly different on a boat like no one had really done at that age for an America's Cup team. And that was it. That was sort of the way in, you know, that was the opportunity and the crack in the door. And then, so we got over there and they sort of, New Zealand accepted us, like they loved the story and, you know, everyone had these flash bases on the shore, and we just had this old barge with a crane that we had found from their Navy that was just a wreck. And so they loved us and took us in, and we kind of started racing and we started doing okay. And then Sid's like, I can't really stop now. So he was committed at that point. So we ended up staying for the round robins until we got knocked out.
And I guess for people that don't understand, it's really hard if you have a bad boat, right? I mean, you sort of just, it's like dragging an anchor, you know, like you got to have the equipment to sort of be up the front.
You do, yeah. I mean, look, there's different sides to the sport where we have what's called one design racing, where everyone will have, it's just a strict one design rule. And then it really does come down to the team. SailGP is another great example. And I think why everyone really enjoys it is because it's the latest technology always, but everyone's on the same platform. Not only that, you can see what everyone's doing. And it doesn't mean you necessarily do the same thing because there's so many different ways you can set up the wing and the boat and run a playbook. But there's no excuses. I mean, everyone's on exactly the same gear. But yeah, when it gets to a technical race like the America's Cup or like auto racing, the fastest boat, the fastest horse, it's going to win the race generally.
Yeah.
I mean,
And then,
certainly in the America's Cup, the fastest boat has won every single time.
yeah. And so you get into you do that opportunity, and you're skippering that young team of it.
Yeah, I was,
Yeah.
I mean, we had like, we were all sort of like 19, 20, low 20s. We had a couple of experienced guys there, actually from the Ragamuffin crew, just to try and sort of
Mhm.
keep us in on the tracks, especially off the water. But
Yeah.
yeah, mate, it was just one of those experiences that was unbelievable because it was a huge amount of work when we're trying to keep this boat running, and all of us are just, someone was like an apprentice, a builder, another guy was a boat builder, a sailmate. So we're all just doing, an electrician, just doing what we can to sort of like playing a game of rugby and just covering the different spots where you could. But at the same time, it was one of the best campaigns of all of our lives. And if I go back now and I look at all of the guys that were involved in that team, they all went on to massive projects, like whether it be the round the world race, Olympics, Grand Prix offshore, America's Cup. So it was a stepping stone. And as tough as Sid, as tough as a man he was to work with, no one else was just providing those sort of opportunities. So it was a tough apprenticeship, but man, it was an apprenticeship.
Yeah. It seemed like meeting Sid that night was for you was that opportunity, that the fork in the road where you had that opportunity to go there, and he took you under his wing, and what a good man for doing that. And we need more Sids in the world these days.
Yeah, for sure. But I think, that's where it's kind of probably, certainly in my case now, stepping back off, getting to the end of the competing part of my career. And probably for you too, the amount of young, junior guys and girls in the water that you help coach in all the different sports. It's actually such a rewarding part now. I mean, back when I was competing more, it was a lot more thinking about just getting the result, the team, et cetera, et cetera. We're now being a part of that, creating a team, and let's say, in our case now, with SailGP, a franchise and a brand and something that can be there over the long term and sustainable and provide a career path for the next guys and girls. That's something pretty cool and pretty special, because even when I look at the opportunity, amazing opportunity Sid gave, the America's Cup's really tough because it's got this really weird, unique set of rules that when you win it, you get to sort of decide the rules for the next one and where it will be. So there's no regular season. And so, yeah, I think to be involved in maybe providing something like that and a career path for that next generation is kind of like an evolution of what Sid and a few other people like that did for us back then.
And how many America's Cups did you end up doing, Jimmy? Like that after that first one, was there opportunities? Like obviously they're like, hey, these kids are good. Like they could give them some money and some backing. They could probably nearly win this thing. Like.
Yeah, well, I pretty much came straight out of high school and then skipped that first one and then did 8 in a row, like the last 25 years, really, consecutively,
And
with
just like
different teams.
yeah, and like, can you like the progression from the boat that you first started in to like where it's at now with the foils and that? Like, what's that like? Because it's a completely different sport, right? Basically, I mean, you're on the water, but now you're foiling across the bay instead of like slugging this big old hull across the bay. Like what's that progression like from like the start of that all the way through to where it is now?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy sort of circle and just better to be lucky than good in terms of the timing to sort of start out in the more, let's say, traditional big lead keels and wing keels and stuff, and then going to gigantic multi-hulls. In 2010, we built this ginormous trimaran with a huge wing, like a plane wing sail, biggest wing ever built in the world still to date, including aerospace and aviation, over 230 feet. You can't get under the Golden Gate Bridge, for example. Like this thing's was a monster. And then the next step was really foiling, and that came during the San Francisco campaign in 2013. And at that point, no one really knew. Like foiling wasn't mainstream. Like it was kind of funny because I remember a ferry in Sydney, like it was a high foil ferry, and I know in like one of the lakes in Italy, there's a couple. So it was there for a long time, the technology. But I think with the materials, it just couldn't make it work because of and then carbon fiber really changed the game. And yeah, so that was really a game changer. As soon as we went to these hard wing sails where we could just produce this incredible amount of lift coefficient and thrust. And then once we've learnt foiling, you just get rid of the hydrodynamic drag. And like we all know, aerodynamic drag, I mean, you just put your arm out the window on a car and you can feel it. But if you try doing that on the water in a powerboat, I mean, it's almost impossible at any sort of speed. So once we're able to lift the entire platforms in these boats out of the water into just these tiny little foils, yeah, it's just like this exponential gain, and the boats would be doing 4 times the speed of the wind. And so the other big change was the athletes on the boat, because I think the sport was always kind of viewed as elitist and not that athletic. I mean, you'd look at some of these America's Cup boats and there's just a host of people on them. Half of them are just sort of sitting there, and the races would go for a long time. And then we sort of changed to these real physical dynamics, and we're bringing in Olympic rowers and swimmers, cyclists from Tour de France cyclists during the last couple of campaigns. And also the decision-making change. Instead of having like quite a long period of time to make a decision and really being able to sort of look up the track and analyze what's going on, because you might be doing 8 or 10 knots, or suddenly you're doing over 40 and you're in a tight racetrack, and you just got to. So yeah, it really changed you couldn't just be a great sailor or strategist. You had to be a great athlete, and vice versa. You had to be an athlete that could sort of make some good decisions, anticipating, but at max heart rate. So it was just a fun time, mate. And just funny how it started off in monohulls. We went to multi-hulls, we then started foiling multi-hulls, and now we came back to monohulls, but now foiling monohulls. So it's just been cool to see where it's all gone.
What was it like when you guys like are starting, I'm guessing testing the foils, I'm pretty sure it's probably all top secret and stuff, but like that first moment, that you lift the boat out of the water on a foil, like that feeling must have been incredible, because I remember the first time that when I started foiling was way back in the early 2000s, and we had the snowboard boot bindings, and we had this aluminum foil that just had no lip. That would you had to be going so fast for it to be going, and as soon as you lost speed, it just went and you sunk, completely in the water, But that first time of getting up and flying was like, whoa, like I'm going to the moon, I imagine it must have felt the same, like exponentially on this huge giant boat to get that lift out of the water for the first time.
Yeah, it was. I mean, everyone was just like,
Tripping.
holy fuck. Like, what, and because the thing was to try and balance the boat, because you've got this massive sail, this carbon fiber wing in the air. We were doing this in San Francisco, and it's probably the worst place you could think of to learn to foil, because, I mean, it's just an intimidating place for our sport, because it's just really windy typically. Water's super cold, big currents. It's just fog. You got Alcatraz, it's sort of like, it's just an intimidating place to be. And yeah, we were just way overpowered trying to, like no one had done this before. It was kind of a little bit like going to the moon for us. We're just sort of learning along the way. And I remember on like the 7th day of getting the big boat, we had this huge crash. Like we're out there and the wind had built. It was the 7th day, and we still hadn't figured out how to fly this thing properly. And we'd done a few laps, and it was a bit hairy, especially in this barrowway part. we got down to the bottom of Alcatraz and we're sort of all having a discussion on board, like, well, what should we do? And then I was like, let's just go for one more lap. And mate, I've definitely thought about that saying now. But so anyway, off we go. We're just Mach 10 up past Alcatraz. And then the wind had really built like a lot, up to kind of 30 knots. And we're way outside our comfort zone. Like these boats just shouldn't have been up there. But at the same time, it's funny, you start seeing all these mistakes you make after the fact. Like that day, that minute when we were up there near the bridge was the strongest ebb flow current of the year right then. And so it was just bad planning. Like we thought we had some sort of a contingency plan, but you don't realize how bad it is until you have to use it. And so even if we just had a problem with hydraulics or something, we had to stop the boat. Mother Nature's trying to drag us offshore out under the bridge, under the Golden Gate Bridge. And on a certain day, you just don't want to be out there, especially on a boat like this. And look, so we did a nosedive, we flip it over. I mean, lucky not to kill anyone really. And then after we'd sort of picked everyone up out of the water and found them, then the boat's on its side and we're just getting dragged out offshore. And there's a place out there called the Potato Patch where the waves will break, on certain days. And, I just remember thinking, shit, if we end up out there, we're in big trouble here. So we're just trying to secure lines to the boat. And we got to this point, like Coast Guard frigates and, all our chase boats and we're tying lines and trying to rewrite the boat at that stage to keep it inside the bay. And slowly but surely, we just lost the battle. And I remember being on the boat and this shadow going over me and this noise. And I just looked up and I just saw the Golden Gate Bridge because I was trying to tie this rope up on the upturned side of the hull. And I was like, we are in big trouble here. And then so out we went into the Potato Patch and then the boat disintegrated and we just went into the night, just got dragged way offshore. And at that point, I think everyone's thinking, shit, we're probably going to lose the boat. Like the wing was absolutely destroyed. And then we eventually we were just waiting for the tide to turn because we just couldn't fight it.
Yeah.
And then in the early hours of the morning, dragged the boat in upside down. And then, man, we were in one of these moments that you face as a sporting team where it was basically we had to decide what we were going to do at that point because we didn't have much time. It takes about a year to build these things. And we had about 10 months to the race.
Wow. Yeah, anyone that's foiled will understand what it's like to have any sort of turbulence, right? Like even when you're surfing and it's nice and glassy and then you go through a wave that's broken, it's got the aeration, like that foil it doesn't like it. It's not this smooth, beautiful, thing. So I can't even imagine. And I have spent a lot of time around San Francisco and not so much in the bay. We did do a paddleboard race around Alcatraz years ago. And that was just, like you said, what an intimidating place with the sharks and the water and just everything about it. It just was scary. But the tide, I can't imagine your boat's foil trying to go against that flooding ebb tide. Like, because what is the, like, what are they going, what's the tide doing there? Is it going 5-6 knots, maybe faster? Like at its peak there, it must be going super fast.
Yeah, it rips. Yeah, it's up right around there. And it's really different. Like there's almost at different stages of the cycle, especially up near the bridge, funny enough, you get these little whirlpools and also the way it kind of wraps around Alcatraz. So tactically racing in the bay is a lot of fun because, and even like we did not at your level, but we did some stand-up paddleboard races in around the bay there.
Yeah.
And a few times we did well because we knew sort of where to go.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's actually quite a fun place. But yeah, for a foil, and at that stage, our control systems, all this sort of stuff, we just really had no idea what we're doing. And they were not even close to the level. And with foils, you can make them stable, but if they're stable, they're generally slow.
Yeah.
So the more unstable you are, the faster they were. And we really started on the wrong end of the spectrum. We were just way too aggressive. And so, yeah, it was a really challenging place to learn to foil, especially in boats of that size and the wings that big. But the same time, mate, like the adrenaline, I mean, you're gearing up each day and you just kind of feel like you're heading into the Coliseum each
Yeah,
day.
because
Like it was
you have
just,
no idea what's about to happen, right? It's like when I was first starting to see it, it just to me it was just like you got the boat would get up, and then it seemed like it just was wanting to dip, right, and wanting to catch that big front part of the boat. It was just looked so scary because I mean it's the same as when you just normal foiling, right? That like that little dip down is like, oh, like just pop it back up, but it's a whole different playing field. Do you think that having foiling experience, like when you got like surfing foil experience, is there any correlation with driving the boat with that and understanding that, or is it a completely different playing field?
no, there's definitely some things that scale up. Yeah, and even just going out with a wing, going
Yeah,
wing foiling, the same thing, because it's really just using, that thrust and really trying to get, the more balanced you are, then generally the easier it is to foil, as opposed to having a lot of load on your front leg or back leg, etc. And also your wing, you really want it set up quite well balanced. But in a lot of ways, it was like flying a plane. But the difference is at that stage of the rule, we had to power the plane's control systems. So in terms of the rake adjustment of the foil and the rudders, all of that was human power. So we just had big units just turning the grinding handles, and they were charging these hydraulic accumulators and sometimes going direct, but you never had enough. So, and not only that, you had all this other stuff you had to do on the boat at the same time. So you were just heavily undermanned and in a really tough environment. And it was just, yeah, like the adrenaline every day going out there. And the learning curve was just vertical because we'd come from these sort of small gains, sailing these old monohulls and just chipping away and refining. Man, this was just massive, massive bites of the apple every single day.
yeah. Speak like what were this like that? Obviously, was a scary story you told, but what are some of the gnarlier stories like with injuries and crashes that you guys have had to endure?
I mean, it's just I think the big thing is the boats are very, let's say, unstable, and you're also pushed like the higher, like on a foil board, the higher you ride in the air, the faster you go because you're just eliminating hydrodynamic drag and wetted surface area. But as you know, if you breach the water on a foil, you're just going to have a full loss of lift. And on our boats, it's generally a big nosedive. And look, there's no seat belts like in cars, and you can't sort of just jump clear of the boat like you can sometimes on a windsurfer or let's say a foil board. So generally, you just go from now over 50 knots to kind of nothing instantaneous. So there's a huge amount of G-force. So there's a lot of broken shoulders, noses, I mean concussions.
Mm,
So the guys now, it's really part of the uniform. I mean, when I started, there was no helmets or the life jacket was just one of those orange ones you'd pull out of a wrapper
yeah.
and and a wetsuit and off you, maybe some gloves or something. But now all the gear, I mean, you got breather bottles and it's another level, but it's kind of cool too because even seeing like the young kids when we started wearing helmets, then they started even on their little dinghy
Mm,
boats, and so that was kind of cool seeing that it was being accepted. And we spoke to like Formula One guys about the safety side because we were kind of learning on the way. We hadn't never been there before, but there was definitely a lot of, I mean, all part of it. But yeah, there was some hard lessons, and unfortunately too, we lost some a guy. So it was in the America's Cup world anyway. So yeah, it was some tough lessons.
yeah. And talk about the athletes. Like you said, what's the term for the is it the winch guy or
Yeah, we call them the grinders.
the grinders? Yeah,
Yeah, or in the last couple of guys, I guess they're called the cyclers, but they essentially, yeah, really at these stage power the boats by turning these hand powered shafts, and they essentially on the Sail GP boats now they essentially power the winch that trims the wing. So it's a lot like just trimming your wing on a foil board or on a windsurfer. That's your accelerator. But back then they really powered everything. We did a couple of America's Cup cycles where the Kiwis were the first to actually bring it in, where we said, well, what about, I mean, people don't ride their bikes with their hands. Clearly the legs are quite powerful. And so that generates a lot more power. And we did a campaign actually like that. They had done the bikes and we had done the hand pumps, and they could definitely generate more power. But the interesting part was it wasn't so much the power that they were able to do a better job of. It was the fact that they now had freed up the hands of the guys providing the power, so they could, because it was so on demand with all the functions, they could now be essentially set up on a bike frame, pumping, power into the hydraulics, but then using their hands to do a whole bunch of different functions on the boat, with actuators, right? Just like changing gears on a mountain bike, let's say. So yeah, there was a lot of things like that sort of came out of it, but they're the guys putting the juice in on the boats. And
Cardio guys, right? You're looking for guys that have
yeah,
amazing cardio that just keep going and going and going.
it'd be right up your alley, mate. Trust me. Like for instance,
I wish I should have come and done a test a few years back.
yeah, you should have. We actually, Kai Hurst was someone that came in and did a campaign with us.
Yep.
And he obviously comes from like the life saving series and offshore long distance swimming, a bit like yourself. And his set of lungs were unbelievable. It was something like almost double the size, I think, his capacity of a lot of our other guys.
Yeah.
But then having said that, there's times in the race, and certainly now, where it's really short, high bursts of energy as opposed to a long kind of marathon grind. It really depended on the campaign and the technology of the boats. But in general, I would say the sport that works out the most, or where we generally see the most participation in those roles, are Olympic rowers.
Yeah.
Irrespective of whether it's using your hands or your legs, their threshold for pain and where they can go to is they're just constantly. And look, that's just a generalization. There's clearly guys like Kai and that'll jump in, or from different backgrounds, but cyclists, but even the pro cyclists and sprint cyclists, the rowers would get up to their level. It was really impressive.
Yeah. I remember, as a kid growing up in Australia, and the rowing seems so, you see them row on TV and it looks so effortless, right? They're just this nice, long, smooth stroke. But I just do remember, like, speaking to a lot of my kayak friends that went to the Olympics and stuff, and the ability to hurt themselves, and their VO2 max is up there with some of the highest levels in the world of all time. And who else have, which would probably be amazing, which have arms and legs, are the cross in the winter games, is the cross country skiers.
Yeah.
Those guys that like do the 10, 15, 20, whatever it is, but like arms and legs. Apparently those guys and girls have incredible VO2 maxes as well. So it makes sense that rowing would have transferred really well to what you guys are doing.
Yeah, and I think especially those cross-country guys and girls that also then have to do the shooting as part of the race, because you've got to be able to get yourself to a point of making, a good, calm decision. And if you make a decision that is wrong or make a mistake, there's going to be a consequence. And that's exactly the same. So yeah, the rowers, and let's face it, you get on a same deal. Like I watched one of our sort of, medalists from the Olympic rowers, and they get on and do a 2K row, and it's one of the smoothest things you've ever seen in your life. I'm like, geez, that looks easy. And then you get on yourself and try and do a 2K like fitness test. It's one of the worst things. And then once you know it and it's coming up at regular intervals during the year, dread it. It's just, for those guys to do that day in, day out, mentally, they're very, very strong.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what was it like, Jimmy? There's also so many different roles in the boat, but to be skippering it, to be the captain, and sort of that like calming voice, like there's a lot of pressure, right? A lot of pressure, a lot of expectations. Like the buck stops on you, right? With the performance.
Yeah, one thing I learned really early on was I started sailing with guys that were older than me really quickly, like especially with going and doing some racing with Sid, but also at a junior level. And what that generally meant was I was always surrounded by guys better than me, more experienced at a higher level. And that, I kind of got lucky to learn that lesson very early on. And from then on, that's really how I built my teams. It was about hiring people that were at a better level than me and getting them come in and do their roles. and not, I'd seen like a few different styles of management at that point, of sort of more micromanagement, and then more of, really giving people the burden of trust and letting them do what you hired them to do. And if they're at a high level, it should be pretty obvious, what we're all gonna do as a team. And so I was really fortunate in that regard that, as we built more and more time and those relationships built, you get to that level that you don't really have to say a whole lot. You kind of can start to understand what the other person's thinking because you've been through good moments, but more importantly, you've been through bad moments together and you know how they're going to react. But it was a tough thing as well, probably hiring you guys with the new sport, let's say, because you could test, you could fitness test and do those sort of things, but until you got to like a match point of an America's Cup match and you're down or you've made a big mistake, you really don't know how some guys are going to react. And again, that was always fascinating to me because you would see guys that'd be absolute studs. They would just come in and test and just be the full package. And you'd see someone come in really average and quiet, but really strong work ethic. And a lot of the time, the average guy would step up in the tough scenarios. And so yeah, that was always fascinating to me. But mate, to be honest, I was just always surrounded by very, very good people, both on the water and off the water.
Yeah. And talk about like, I don't think many people think of, I mean, I wouldn't say like, you are building a team, right? And there's, I mean, for example, for the America's Cup, like how many is in a team? And then you guys are going into camp, right? Like you guys are living together, you're training together, like you have this is a full-time job, full-time expedition, training probably 2-3 times a day. Like what did that look like and how long, like what was the preparation like up, for an America's Cup? How long were you guys together and how did that all work out?
Yeah, well, generally the 3 to 4 year cycles, and you do everything in house. I mean, you design, you build, you engineer, you test, you sail, you have a marketing team, a back office. So the team's well over 100, and depending on the campaign, sometimes even more than that. The crew, I mean, it depends on the boats. Let's say the last campaign, you're racing with 8 crew, I think, on the boat, but you've still got well in excess of 100 people outside here. So you have your boat building team. And so you it's a real design technology race. So you will be doing now a lot of simulator, really looking at production schedules. Okay, the first race is at this date, and now you work back kind of your 3 to 4 years and you start planning your development. And it's the question is, okay, we could build the boat early before the race and give it to the sailors, and they'll improve it. They'll make it faster, and the more every hour they get on it, they're going to get better and better and faster. But the more time you can give to the design team and the engineers, the more advanced you can get from your concepts, your foil designs, your systems, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a balance because you don't want to get it like the day before the race because there's a whole lot of teething issues, but you don't want to get it too early that you've missed maybe a full cycle of development that someone else may have developed. But yeah, mate, it's literally 7 days a week. Like you are just every day. That doesn't matter what you're really trying to utilize every weather day. When you're ashore, you're just going through all of the data and what you've been through, making decisions. I mean, things are constantly changing all the time. Sometimes you'll break something that'll change the schedule. It's really quite tough, because it's very hard to plan anything. Certainly in terms of family life as well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's an awesome adventure because it's kind of like a community. You're spending more time with your teammates than you are with your family, and you just build these really, really tight bonds ultimately. So by the time you get to the race, you've got all the teams have got very locked in units.
Yeah. When was the last time you raced the America's Cup?
My last one, my 8th one, was last year in Barcelona for the
Okay.
Italian team. Yeah,
And
2024.
then now that's the Sail GP is the sort of the transition, or it seems like it's the more modern style of racing, right? It's an exciting style of racing, and maybe for the viewers, what's the difference between America's Cup to Sail GP?
Yeah, look, so I mean, America's Cup is actually one of the oldest international trophies in world sport. I mean, it's been going for over 170 odd years. But it's really, let's say, somewhat of a hobby for wealthy people.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of money you need to do this sort of event, like it's a huge arm race. It's basically a 4-year campaign for a race that generally goes for about a month at the end, depending on whether you're the defender or the challenger. And that's with over 100 people. And half of the budget is usually people costs, and then you've got all these sort of design, build costs as well. The challenge there is also that when you win the America's Cup, you get to write the rules as the defender. You decide where it is. You may have just raced in catamarans and say, no, we're going to monohulls. So everything you just worked on is worth nothing.
It's crazy.
You might change the size of the race course. It's like totally shifting the goalposts. And not only that, the goalposts. And sorry, once you win, you're automatically into the final for the next one. So you have quite a big advantage. What it really was missing was a regular season. And it's hard to have a regular season because you can't do any, let's say, future planning for events because we're governed by this old document like 10 Commandments, a deed of gift that says this is what happens, and only the winner can plan the next event. So you've got to constantly wait for the winner. That's tough because, look, when you're dealing with broadcasters, sponsors, venues, think of any other sport where you just do the Super Bowl or something and then say, right, guys, we'll get back to you in about a year. And hey, guess what? We've changed it. We're now on a square field and the ball is square. You know what I mean? Like it'd just be crazy. And we're on the final too, by the way.
Yeah.
So look, it's a really cool, I love it, obviously, the America's Cup, but it's, let's face it, it's hard to really add value to it. And so in one of these campaigns, I worked with Larry Ellison and Russell Coates. We won
Is
a
that
few.
Oracle?
Oracle, yes. We won
yeah.
a couple of America's Cups. And then the third one, we were going for a third win in the row and we got beaten. And Larry said, look, this is crazy. Like it just doesn't make sense when you look around. It's hard for the athletes in terms of sustainability. It's hard for the sponsors and partners. And then at the end of campaigns, you're left with a big liability at the end of you get all this equipment. What do you do with it, especially if they've changed the rules? So that was really the catalyst for Sail GP between he and a guy called Russell Coates. And the whole concept was, let's look at other sports, how they do it. Instead of having two boats racing, like in the America's Cup, let's have a fleet. Let's have them the latest technology, the fastest boats, make them athletic, but let's have everyone on the same equipment and make the data completely open. So if you're a new team coming in, like we've got a Swedish team coming in as our 13th team now next season, they know they're going to be on the same platform and they can go and look at all the data and see what's happened in the past. Now, if you're a new team coming into Formula One or MotoGP, I mean, man, forget about being competitive in season one. Who knows when? It's a huge bridge to climb. So yeah, and I think the other thing was the regular racing that the athletes really want to be doing. And now it's a stadium. Like we're filling huge stadiums. I mean, we race inside harbours. We have sidelines, and one sideline is just the grandstand and the hospitality. The races are 12, 15 minutes long. You've got 13 of these things just tearing around the course. And actually on the broadcast now, I mean, 80% of the audience are not sailors. They're actually racing fans. So yeah, mate, it's a big shift. The America's Cup will always be there, but in my view, it's kind of like a World Cup kind of Olympics every 4 years.
Yeah.
And we're like the Premier League sort of regular season, there's a race every few weekends. And we're seeing that too from a business point of view. I mean, if you look at Sail GP, the franchises, there's one per country. When we started out, they were going for around 5 million, and the last teams, you're north of 60 million now to purchase a franchise. So yeah, it's an incredible time I think for guys and girls that are coming up through the sport to really identify, wow, here's a career path. And not only that, to see ex-athletes now involved in the ownership, because you see that in other sports as well, especially over in the US.
Yeah. Yeah. And from the small parts I've seen of it seems like, being able to see the information on the screen, like the speeds and the boat, like that information is so key, like as a viewer, right? Because, I think with the Formula One too, like understanding like the technology and what they're going through and how fast they're going, like that stuff is invaluable for your audience, right? And then also the racing looks really tight and like a little bit like, hey, if you ain't rubbing shoulders, you ain't racing type deal, which leads to a lot of crashes or leads to a lot of like, head butting. But it seems like that's what it's made for. Tight, fast, interesting, balls to the wall. Like, I don't care if you're there, like, get out of my way type of racing, it seems very exciting.
Yeah, and also there's heavy penalties because you're rewarded in these boats for pushing. The harder you push, the faster you will go, and that means
Yeah.
in a race situation, trying to get inside a boat. But if you get too high in the ride height, you're going to crash. If you crash into another boat, there's going to be heavy penalty points for the season. So you've got this constant risk management the whole time, and it's very, very dynamic, especially in the start. I mean, the start is essentially kind of like a motocross start, except imagine all the bikes are free to go,
Yeah.
and they've just got to be behind the line when the gun goes, the countdown. And if you're over early, you got to get behind all the other bikes. So everyone just goes into this funnel like a motocross, and then we've got to make the first turn. So yeah, it's for everyone. Whether you're a spectator, a sponsor, an athlete, it's just a game changer now. So it's just an exciting time. And one thing that always frustrated me with the Cup campaigns is you're working on these amazing bits of kit and tech, and it could be the system, it could be the foil, carbon fiber, the wing, whatever it is. But you can't tell anyone about it. Like you're
Yeah.
hiding it. And then when you can tell them, it's too late. Like the race
Yeah.
has happened, no one really cares. Now, because we're all in the same equipment and that we're constantly developing it, it's all open. So from a fan point of view, you can educate them about everything you're doing. Nothing is off limits. And I think that's another cool thing for
Yeah.
us as a sport that's really about growth and bringing more people into it, is to showcase the athletes, the tech, the software, the dynamics of the team, the whole shooting match that goes into this.
Yeah, that's awesome. And where are you, Jimmy? Like, talking about your career, are you still captaining? Are you part owner? Like, what's the future holding for Jimmy Spill, and where you at right now?
Yeah, so I just signed off on the America's Cup. I did eight campaigns, 25 consecutive years. I mean, I literally went there after high school, and I'll be 47 this year. So I was definitely the last one, hanging on, let's say. I still love racing. I love competing. I love sport in general. But at this point now, I've one of the co-owners of the Italian team, Red Bull Sail GP Italy. I'm a sort of emergency backup if need be. But
Yeah.
look, it's sort of, I've always, even coming up through sport, I always really respected the guys and girls that were able to get results on the field of play, but then also kind of reinvent themselves and grow as well when their sporting or competitive careers kind of came to an end. And, from all different sports, even I remember looking at Greg Norman, saying, okay, he was an awesome golfer, but then he became a very, very successful businessman at the same time and really helped to grow the sport. And I think if you look at a whole lot of different, rugby players, tennis, swimming, etc., that's where I looked at. So yeah, for me, this was a big part, and now I'm sort of running the team, one of the co-owners, founded it at the beginning. So yeah, it's just again, I'm constantly taken out of my comfort zone, which I really enjoyed as an athlete, but in a different set of circumstances. And it's no different the way to kind of problem solve and try and work yourself through it and learn the lessons. It's just about getting out there and getting amongst it and asking questions, and then just trying to learn the lessons and just sort of keep growing each day. It's a cool process to be part of a team out there, playing the game.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've done it all right. You started as a little kid in Sydney there, and it's like being the janitor at Quicksilver or something, right? And then you're shipping boxes, and then and you work your way up until you're the CEO, right? So the best CEOs are the ones that have done every job, and they understand what every job needs and entails, and has a respect for that, and they're not too big for everyone, So I'm sure that you're still learning, but I'm sure you have a wealth of knowledge of what's needed to make a successful team.
Yeah, mate, I've just been so fortunate and really lucky, just again, in the timing, the people I got to work with. And I think exactly what you say is really true. I mean, no matter what profession you're in, if you can get those hours learning about what you're trying to do, and the different levels and stages, and it could just be business as well. You start out on the bottom of the business and then slowly work your way up. Well, you're really going to know about that business if you become the CEO or you're running it. If you can't, there's no shortcut in most things in life. So, and that's, I think, kind of a cool thing. in that there is a process and you've got to do the hard work. And if there's one place that shows that, it's sport.
Yeah.
Like it's just so there's no way to sort of shortcut your way to the top. And even then, even if you do everything right, put the work in, there's still no guarantees. That's kind of why I love it, and I think all of us do.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, so cool, man. I mean, I think when I go back to meeting you, we met at Santa Cruz, the downwinder, the Davenport race on the stand up, and I know you love stand up and foiling. Like, what do you do? What are you doing when you got some spare time? Like, what's your poison these days? Are you like winging or foiling? What is it that Jimmy's up to when he's got some free time?
Yeah, I'm just getting over a few injuries, but look, I love just being on the water,
Yeah.
and I think the cool thing today is with the materials and the technology, the foiling has been a big game changer. The barrier to entry is quite low. I mean, certainly in our sport, again, I mean, you saw how I started as a kid. You need a lot of equipment generally to go sailing. You need trailers and all this gear and masts and stuff. Where now you just have your little foil board and you have a power drill so you can put it in the boot of your car,
Yeah.
and you have an inflatable wing with a pump like a backpack. And so that's so cool because you can be a guy or a girl and you can just get on the water and go foiling. And the concepts are still the same as the bigger boats. So for me, yeah, mate, I used to love the stand-up paddle.
Yeah.
I always respected. I kind of really love the grind of that.
Mm.
Again, it was just really sort of a bit of a mind game, especially like a Molokai race or one of the longer ones. But now I'm doing a bit of towing with some mates. I've got some local guys in San Diego, and that, again, it's just learning something new. That you go to a place that, I mean, I'm not a great surfer. I do like it, but conditions where you are a wave you'd never really consider probably to go and surf could be an epic place
Yeah.
for foiling. So like a little bit probably like stand up surfing. And again, I've never been that worried too much about what people think about if it's,
Cool or
you
not?
know, cool or not, and kind of, looking to guys like you and Kai Lenny and the people that just aren't afraid. They're just going to get out there and learn something new and not afraid to start from the beginning and be humbled and learn a new skill on the water. It's, I think, one of the best things in life.
Yeah. Yeah. Foiling sure is taking a whole new trajectory with the foil drives and the boards that have the motors, and just it's now there's the power wing. They're getting rid of the
Yeah.
get rid of the wing. Now we're doing the power wing, and it's just like the evolution is just going so fast. It's crazy. So well, that's awesome. What would you say is your? I mean, this is a sort of a silly question sometimes, but do you have like one of the most memorable moments you've had in the water or on the water? Like, is there something that stands out to you?
Yeah, I think probably like really achieving a win in the America's Cup,
Mm.
like actually getting to hold that trophy, because it was just such a far away dream.
Childhood
uh,
dream come
Dream
true.
that you just, yeah, like, yeah, and it was something I really was inspired by as a kid. And so that I think was one, and doing it and just seeing your teammates and just your family and just how big a deal, and that feeling of all that hard work and you finally pull it off is very, very addictive,
Mm.
because once you sort of get to that point, it's one of the most, for me anyway, that pathway was one of the most rewarding things I've ever experienced in my life, working with a group like that. I'd say the other one was being in a Sydney to Hobart race where we had a very, very bad storm where we lost a lot of people,
Mm.
boats back in, I think it was in 98, which actually ironically was my first Sydney to Hobart. And I was pretty young. I remember being sick at the beginning of it, but I just remember like one of the watchers coming out on deck and we're in Bass Strait and you just look to the horizon, the wind's well over 70 knots and the size of these waves, it's just like mountains, and you
Wow.
just can't understand. It's almost like your eyes are deceiving you. You
Mm.
just can't believe what you're looking at. And I think the memorable moment was just Mother Nature, especially in the water, just how, yeah, unbelievable it can be.
Yeah, it's how things can change so fast, man. It's crazy. And then last thing, anything else that Jimmy Spittle's like looking to achieve, or any goals? I mean, there's always goals, but anything specific left that that's left on the table that you really want to try and get after?
Mate, I think it's like the next sort of ride or the next session. That's the thing I really like. I still, when the text messages start, if I'm in a certain area or town,
Yeah,
it looks like, oh, there could be some waves. We could be
be
into
on.
foiling. Hey, let's get the
Yeah,
jet skis ready and stuff. I mean, just that. It's like I'm a schoolboy again, you know, like
yeah,
you're thinking about it. You're looking at models. Yeah. Okay. What time are we meeting? You know, and you're just so pumped. You just can't wait to get out there. And so I think the next moment that I look forward to are those times. It's,
yeah.
yeah, it's just so cool.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Well, thanks so much for sharing. There's some amazing stories, and for anyone that's wasn't up on sailing, now you are, and just appreciate it, mate. You're a hero to many, and hope your recovery goes well with the stem cells. And be sure to reach out, mate, if you're ever in Hawaii. I've got the ski ready for you, and we'll get out there.
Yeah. Thanks, mate. And again, a real honor to be on here, and I don't want to embarrass you. You're definitely someone I looked up to as a kid, seeing what you did and those Molokai races, and the other aspects of being a waterman. Yeah, it's really very, very fortunate to spend a bit of time with you. Thank you.
All right, Jimmy. Cheers, buddy. Thanks.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks for listening to Living in Liquid. I'm your host, Jamie Mitchell. This episode was produced by Stacey Piggott. Thank you to the Australian band The Drones for our epic intro music. Please don't forget to follow or subscribe. We'll see you next week.